What's a great meal to serve on a brisk fall November day? Well, what about beef stew?
This is an inventory list of all my freeze-dried inventory and all the totes I have. So I'm going to make beef stew, so I need to have potatoes, beef, onions, and carrots, at least that much. So on my computer, I'm going to go ahead and hit Control F, and this brings up a dialog, and I have potatoes ready to go here. So I'm going to hit Find Next, and I have potatoes right here, and we're going to take a look at these potatoes that were packaged in November 21 of 2022. These are going to be found in tote number 49, bag number 1. So I'm going to go ahead and put in here, this is the date that I took these out of inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and write down that location for my potatoes. Now I need to have carrots. So let's put in carrots. And here's my carrots. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. So I need to write in here that I'm going to be taking these on 11/3 of 24. And now I need to look for my beef, and that's going to be under meat, comma, beef, because if I put down just beef by itself, I'm going to come up with all kinds of meals and stuff. So I have meat, comma, beef, assorted chunks, cubes. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this from tote number 24, packet number 6, and that gets removed from inventory on November the 3rd. So I now have my beef, I have carrots, I have potatoes. So let me take a look at my menu one more time. What else do we need? I got onions. Okay, so let's pop back to onions. So I got onions. So it'll be interesting to see how I have onions. These are probably going to be minced onions. So I'm going to look for tote number 33 and 7 for my onions. And these will be taken from inventory on this date. So I've got to go down in my basement and find all my ingredients for my beef stew and collect all those.
The first bag we're looking for is carrots, and that's going to be bag number 2. So this should be bag number, let's see, we got carrots right here. Now inside each tote, I also have a copy of this, so I'm just going to put down that this was removed right there. So I got the carrots right there. Then we need the potatoes. Oh, no, this is the raw beef. So not only is this beef, but I also did it raw. So that's going to be good because that means I won't be cooking cooked beef twice. So we got the raw beef there. We next need the onions, and that's going to be in bag number 12. There's the onions. Mark those off. And I also realized in the same tote that I had my onions, I have potatoes. So I got my potatoes there also. The recipe I will be using is a modified recipe from Gordon Ramsay's cookbook for beef stew. Now, I have my 4 ingredients ready for my beef stew, plus I found in my freeze-dried pantry some freeze-dried garlic. So we'll be using 5 freeze-dried ingredients for the beef stew. I have the potatoes, carrots, and the onions right here. I have the raw beef cubes right here. Really, this is the only one I'm concerned about. And so before we get into this, we're going to do the sniff test on the beef to make sure this is good. So this beef is about 3 years old. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this packet up, and I'm going to use my good old nose to slowly smell the beef to see how it smells. If I smell any hydrogen sulfide gas, which is like a sewer gas smell, that would be an indicator not to use the beef, or any smell of rancidity. So here we go. I smell absolutely nothing, so this beef is good to go. So let me reach my hand in here now. Here's the oxygen absorber. It's still kind of, it's not quite like flour, it's not quite like gravel, but it actually, as I'm holding this, it's starting to warm up again. So this is telling me that all the oxygen in this was expelled. And this is what my beef looks like right now. And this is raw beef. You could use cooked beef, but basically since we're making stew, you'd end up cooking your beef twice, which is okay. But since this is raw beef, this will need to be cooked, and this will give our beef stew a little bit better flavor. So I'm going to go ahead and take the recipe here, which I had to convert from metric into English measurements, and we're going to go ahead and measure everything out for the beef stew. These are my freeze-dried ingredients. The freeze-dried beef yielded 4 cups of beef, which is just perfect. I have 4 cups of the potatoes. Now, when I did my potatoes, when I put those up about 3 years ago, I did them like in a fry shape. That way I could use these for French fries, and if I needed to use these for anything else, like the beef stew, they're easy to break up into little teeny cube pieces, which I did here. So I figure about a half a potato per person per serving, so I figure that's about 4 cups of potatoes. 2 medium onions, and I've estimated that to be about a half a cup of onions, and then about 3 carrots or so, and I estimate that to be about a cup of my carrots. And of course I have my freeze-dried garlic, which is about 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, which will be about a teaspoon of the freeze-dried stuff here. Now here's a big question. How do you measure everything for a recipe when using freeze-dried foods? Well, there's a 4-to-1 rule that I came up with that I use to do freeze-dried foods. On average, all foods come out to be about 80% of water. Some are less, some are more, but on average, it's 80%. So what we're going to do, we're going to take all these ingredients, except for the garlic here, and we're going to put these into a bowl, and I'm going to measure the weight. And whatever the weight is, I'm going to multiply that by 4 to come up with the water. I have my bowl and scale, and it's been zeroed out to 0 ounces. So I'm going to add all my potatoes. I'm going to add all my beef. I'm going to add all my onions. And I'm going to add all my carrots. And this comes up to 11.85 ounces. So we're going to do some quick little math. Well, let's just round this up to 12 ounces. 12 times 4 is going to be 48. So I need to add 48 ounces of water to rehydrate all my vegetables to bring them back to what their natural state would be. So we're going to go ahead and put our dry ingredients into our pot, and then add our water. So we had 12 ounces of dry ingredients, so we're adding 48 ounces of water to rehydrate our stew ingredients. Now that we got the dry ingredients rehydrated, we can go back to the recipe. So we have 2 cups of water, 1/4 cups of beef broth or bouillon, 1 teaspoon of thyme, we have 3 bay leaves, and we have our rehydrated garlic, which is 3 teaspoons or 3 cloves, and then salt and pepper to suit taste. So I got a teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon pepper. And we're going to let that simmer. The last remaining ingredients is 2 tablespoons of flour, and that's basically dissolved in water. Flour is a thickening agent to make your stew a little bit thicker. Now, because my wife is gluten-free, we're not going to use flour, or you could use gluten-free flour, but in this case, I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of cornstarch dissolved in water. So this is the finished product. Beef stew with potatoes, carrots, and onions, all out of my freeze-dried inventory. Oh, and garlic, don't forget that. I had to add a little bit of extra cornstarch to thicken up the gravy, so now it's nice and thick. And I added a little bit of extra salt and pepper to taste. So the next thing to do is try this out and see how it tastes. Well, here we go. Beef stew made from freeze-dried ingredients. So the taste will tell. Get a little bit of potato, a little bit of meat, and that is excellent. So this is just one example of what you can do with your freeze-dried inventory. And just remember the 4-to-1 ratio. 1 part freeze-dried food, 4 parts water. So if it's going to be 1 ounce of freeze-dried food, then you put 4 ounces of water. That's a rough, basically, measurement, and something you might have to adjust, but that's the initial ratio to rehydrate freeze-dried foods. It's different for different foods, for different processes, but for soups, casseroles, stew like this, 4-to-1. And if you happen to have any leftovers of your beef stew, you can go ahead and freeze dry them and add them back into your inventory. To make my stew, I used all of my raw roast beef that was freeze dried, but I only used a fraction of my potatoes and carrots and onions. So all of these are going to be resealed with a new oxygen absorber and returned to my freeze-dried inventory. They were only open for about 10-15 minutes, not a problem, and they can just be sealed and put back into inventory. Now, if you're in a really humid place, or if you forgot to reseal them after a day or so, just throw them back into your freeze-drying tray, put it on extra dry time for, say, a half hour or so, and any moisture that may have crept into your food will be removed in short time. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope maybe you learned something new. I'd like to thank you for your time. Please subscribe, and I'll send you another video shortly.